Hey guys, this is Tyler here with Socrates Investments and Trading. I'm going to talk briefly why I didn't purchase a house, even though I could have easily purchased one in my mid to late 20s. I was looking at the potential back in 2017, 2018 of buying a house, even just as like an investment that I wouldn't say live in, but I eventually ended up not purchasing one. I was looking at potentially buying a place in Chicago or Florida or elsewhere. And there were some big factors why I eventually opted not to. I wouldn't have outright bought it in cash. I would have gotten a 10-year mortgage. I would have made a large down payment. There were big factors. One of them was the tax situation. Anyone here who has never owned a home, like a house, you have the yearly tax liability if you're in the US, and this can range greatly depending on the state, city, of course, the purchase price of the house. Realistically, let's go here for starters. If you buy like a $200,000 house in most cities, you're going to be paying taxes of probably between $3,000 to $6,000 per year. If you're in a house that's like in the $400,000 range, like my parents' home, you're going to have like a $5,000 to up to $10,000 tax liability. In some states like Florida, it might be a little lower, but Florida's not the norm as far as property taxes go. Obviously, if you don't pay these taxes, eventually that house can be taken from you. And that was one of the first reasons why I didn't like this ideal. I didn't want to be constantly burdened by this tax bill. And even if I had found renters, you still then have to deal with the renters. This also takes me into another problem, is upkeep. So my dad owned many properties throughout his life, and at one point he owned a small apartment building in Missouri, in St. Louis, Missouri. People don't realize the amount you have to spend in upkeep on a yearly basis, and it's not often factored in to like the ownership of a house. It's sometimes factored into like a 10 or 20-year plan. But when you have, say, an AC unit that goes out, or you have to replace windows or the floors or any number of things, what do? You have to obviously fix it, or you have to hire someone to fix it. In either case, it's going to be pretty pricey, and people forget this with homes. Roof is another example. Obviously, if you have a bad roof, like eventually your house can be completely decimated, destroyed. So these are things that one has to configure into the cost of home ownership. And then the other thing is, do you want to be tied to a certain country? Do you have enough faith in that country? It's going to be a headache. Like my dad, when he owned these apartments, he always had to have a guy that was living there in Missouri. He was able to call on a moment's notice to correct things, to fix things, to deal with problems with these tenants. It was constant. And imagine this was only 6 units. Imagine people of like 60 units or 600 units. You're going to need a team. So you also have to figure that into the cost and just the headache of these properties that you own. And this is another thing about it, is the difference between owning homes or houses and owning apartments. Typically, most real estate, if you want to say gurus, investors, recommend people to have several apartments or an apartment building, because you aren't just reliant on one family, on one house generating the income. You have several homes to balance out the cost if a tenant moves out, a tenant's not paying, etc. But it also adds more headaches because you have more people than that you have to deal with. Now, another problem also with the ownership situation is, are you going to be living long term in that city or place? Yeah, in many of the big cities in the US, properties have skyrocketed in the past 5 to 7 years. No question. Now, the prices have came down a bit since the post-COVID era, but they're still very elevated. We'll take my parents' home, for example, in Florida. They bought their house in 2005, and that house has gone up around 2.5 to 3 times, depending on housing estimates. Yeah, that's very significant. That's actually outpaced inflation, but they also have been in that house for 20 years. And that's a key factor. So if you say bought a house and then you wanted to offload that house like in 3 years, or you needed the extra cash flow, you might take a loss. That has to be remembered, because even though it's often a hedge against inflation, the home or real estate, often when those numbers are taken into account, it's over like 10 or 20 plus year periods of owning that home. Now, another factor was the stock market, crypto markets really taking off at that point in time, 2016 to 2018. And I wanted to put most of my funds there. One of the big pluses of just having a large amount of crypto or stock investments is you could take it wherever you go. It's like virtual money, basically, for good or bad. You can't just pick up your house and take it with you wherever you go. So it's very mobile in that sense. And that's a huge plus. When you're looking at homes, on the other hand, you are most definitely physically tied to that place or market, and you have to be stationed there or have someone stationed there that can handle things like I'd mentioned before. The last major factor was simply because I was solo. I didn't have spouse, girlfriend, kids, etc. And so for me, yeah, if I'd had those people in my life, yeah, definitely, I would have had a house. I would have bought a home. But as a single person, I was like, what's the point of it? Yeah, if I had a family, it would make sense. But I was traveling a lot at that time to foreign countries, and I was exploring potential businesses to launch. So like I said, I need a lot of cash available I could use to fund these ventures. And that was probably one of the biggest factors. People often, they have a family and whatnot. They need a stable, decent place to live. For anyone here who's also in my position or not, give me your feedback below. Thank you.